Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Monday. This is April the 13th. It is day 11 of counting the Omer. It is currently 4:18 in the evening, early evening. And I didn't get a chance to do my Sabbath study review yesterday. Yeah, I kind of feel some type of way about that. But this morning, yesterday was a weird day for me, y'all. But this morning I was able to get up early in the morning and get my Sabbath study review done, and it was absolutely amazing. And so that's what I want to share with you now. I'm turning to it in my Sabbath notebook. I actually started a study yesterday. I was still in Exodus chapter 21, but this time I was looking at verses 12 through 27. And so I started on it yesterday, but I'm just going to stick with the notes that I did today, if you don't mind. Again, the Sabbath study that I did this weekend. I actually finished the entire chapter to that part. Because Saturday, when I first was doing the Sabbath study, I only got like the first 6 verses. I didn't finish it at all. But it was so much to glean. So, and what caused that was this. What caused me to not be able to get all the verses done and really like buckle down with this thing, and what made me come back to it even this morning, is because Exodus chapter 21 verse 1 opens by saying, now these are the judgments. I'm going to stop like right there. Now these are the judgments. And that was significant to me because of my studies, my weekday studies in Leviticus chapter 26. And when I say my weekday studies, I'm going to just make this about Tuesday through Friday. Because like, I think Monday, I don't know what it is with me with Mondays. But anyway, Tuesday. My weekday studies is in the book of Leviticus chapter 26, and it's actually a continuation from a study that I did a couple of years ago in Leviticus chapter 26 that I call the Waves of Discipline. Now I actually call it the something old, something new, because we're back in Leviticus 26, so that's something old, but it's new because we're dealing with the first 13 verses, which are the blessings. So this particular Sabbath study in Exodus 21, it literally took me back to the initial study in Leviticus 26, which was again the ways of discipline. And that's because in verse 14 and 15 of Leviticus 26, I want to read those verses to you. It says, but if you do not obey me and do not observe all these commandments, and if you despise my statutes, the statutes are your written laws, it's 10 of them, your written laws. And if your soul abhors my judgment, and that's the part that we're looking at now in Exodus chapter 21, because in Exodus 21, after God gave the 10 commandments, which were the written laws, which God wrote with his own finger, after he gave the 10 commandments in in chapter 21, verse 1, he says, now these are the judgments. And so this part here in Leviticus 26, it said, if your soul abhor my judgments, so that you do not perform all my commandments, which was 10, but break my covenant. And that part, because one of the commandments was a covenant, which was commandment number 4, which was the covenant of keeping the Sabbath. God said to remember his Sabbath, to keep it holy. And y'all know that that's being broken today. Y'all know that. Like, yeah. Anywho, this was a prerequisite. The not performing of God's commandments, abhorring his judgments, despising his statutes, not keeping his covenant was the prerequisite of living a cursed life. A cursed life. A cursed life. That part. So my question was, it was a long time ago and it still is today, how can you keep something that you don't know? So what are the judgments? And it's so crazy that God brings me to this and doesn't let he brings me to this and he doesn't let me miss this. So these are the judgments, and that's what we're looking at, beginning with verse 1 of Exodus chapter 21. I almost said Genesis. So we looked at the 10 commandments. We looked at that a week ago. I think it was, because this week is chapter 21. So we looked at that a week ago. And like I said, the first 3 has to do with our relationship with God. He tells us to not have no other gods before him. He tells us to not make an idol of anything. And he says to not take his name in vain. That part of not having no other gods before him, that includes when we put our jobs before God. Like, for instance, on a Sunday, let me do it Sunday. On a Sunday, if your job calls you and say, I need you to work on Sunday, but you normally go to church on Sunday, and so now you don't go to church because your job, I said what I said, because your job has called you, that's putting another God before our Heavenly Father. And the thing is, we'll be quick to say, the job ain't my God. I don't worship that job. God said, have no other God, little g, before him. So anything you place before God, if you listen to what another human being say ahead of listening to what God say, like if God is telling you to do something, but then another human being says, well, I need you to do da 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 da, and you do what the other human beings say, as opposed to what you have put another God, little g, ahead of God, Almighty God. So he tells us not to do that, not to make an idol of anything. He says not to take his name in vain. And one of the things that stands out to me in reference to this is that last week in our study, we learned how this includes how we carry ourselves. Because when we carry ourselves, or how we carry ourselves is a reflection on our Father, who trains us, disciplines us. Like back, I think the example that I use is how back in the day, you get ready to go somewhere, like as a child, a little child, you're going somewhere, you're going to visit your friend's house, stay overnight or however, and your parent will tell you, you better be on your best behavior. I better not hear anything bad about you, and if something was to happen and you were to be disobedient, what would they say? That child ain't got no home training. So we represent God, and a lot of times we have taken this part about not taking God's name in vain. We have limited to what we say, and so people be like, the cursing, don't say that, watch what you say, because you don't want to take God's name in vain. But yeah, it includes how we walk, to how we carry ourselves. I already mentioned that commandment number 4 was the Sabbath, that it was to be kept holy. The remaining commandments, the remaining 6 commandments, actually had to do with our relationship with one another. So you have to honor, the commandment number 5 was to honor your mother. Your mother and your father. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I should say your parents. Commandment number 5 is to honor your parents, honor your father and your mother. Commandment number 6, do not murder. Then there was do not steal, do not commit adultery, do not lie, do not covet. That is all of the commandments. And by the way, coveting leads to stealing and adultery. and it puts one in a position to be either murdered or to murder. Just saying. As I was looking over these 6, I was seeing Satan in a lot of them. I'm like, first of all, God say do not lie, and the father of the lies is Satan. He says do not covet. We know that Satan coveted. He wanted to be worshipped. Well, no worship should go to anybody but God. He tried to steal, and he tried to he did, in a sense, he did steal, in that what he took from Adam and Eve, what he took from all of us. You know what? I'm not even going to go into trying to break this thing down. I just see Satan all up in this part. Like the fact that the commandment is to honor your father and your mother. You know, honor our parents. We're here today because of our parents. Well, our heavenly Father is God. And so Satan did not honor God by being disobedient, by coveting, by lying. Like, he did not honor God himself. So he did not honor his creator who created him. The murder, it says do not murder. The fact that so many angels followed him and lost because they followed him and ended up taking mates down here on this earth of women. And the fact that Adam and Eve now, or they had to die because of what Satan did. So like, yeah, all of that. I just see him up in all of that. Anywho, I want you to keep in mind that when Moses brought the Israelites out of Egypt, they were accompanied by a mixed multitude, a large group of others who were not Israelites, who also took the opportunity to come out of Egypt. And one of the things that we're told in Exodus chapter 12 is that I would say to look at verse 33, verse 37 and 38. We're told that as far as the men of Israel walking was 600,000. That did not include the women. It did not include the children. It did not even include the elderly. So it was a lot of them that came out of Egypt, and they had sheep. They had flocks of sheep and herds of goats. And so you have all of them. In addition to all of them, you have this vast mixed company that's coming out. And so it was necessary, because it was a lot of them, it was necessary for order to be kept. And without that order, there would have been chaos and confusion. So it was necessary for laws to be given, rules to be given to govern their behavior, because like I just feel like they could have went mad. And what I mean by that, what is her name? Maya Angelou wrote this poem or book entitled, it had to do with Cage Bird, Why the Cage Bird Sings, I think it is. And I think about that often. I don't know, like I would have to read over the book again. But as I think about that title, I think about the fact that when people have been in cages or enslaved, controlled, and then all of a sudden that control is removed off of them and they have freedom. They don't know, like, what they're all over the place. Kind of makes me think about how you put a baby in a playpen, you limit I gotta get this phone call. You know what? No, I don't, because I think that's an update. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave voicemail. Get that call. When we put babies in playpens, we do it to protect them. We do it to limit their space. Now, it's space in that playpen. It's a big amount of space for the baby. But it limits how much they're able to get around. And then after a while, you enlarge in that playpen. You take them out the playpen, but you start gating off and you give them more room. So it's a controlled amount, but the controlled amount is for the protection. And those Israelites, having been all that time in slavery, having that barrier, bondage, whatever you call it, gate, playpen, having that removed off of them now, it was easy for them to get themselves in trouble. Like little kids, it was easy for them to get themselves in trouble. Anywho, those judgments, those statutes that were given were necessary. And so looking at the very first of the judgments in chapter 1, it had to do with how they dealt with each other. For example, the very first one, which is the first 6 verses, again, they were once slaves, so that's all they knew. And so if they now tried to rule over one another in the wilderness, God put rules in place to govern them so that they don't imitate what they saw living in Egypt, which is the abuse of power. They had rules to do with their behaviors in the wilderness as they were being brought to the promised land. They needed to understand that there was consequences, that again, they could not do the things that they witnessed or experienced in Egypt. They could not now turn around and do that. Their freedom was not for them to turn around and bind somebody else. So if the person did end up with a servant for whatever reason, there was another number of reasons that was given. For instance, they might have needed to pay restitution. They could have stolen something and they needed to pay it back. They might have ended up in servanthood in order to provide for themselves. There's several reasons that was given. Several reasons. I call it employees, slaves, employees, servants. Anyway, the employer basically in those first 6 verses was being addressed, and they was being they were being told that, or informed that, there was a certain way that they were supposed to handle their servants. They were supposed to handle those who chose to work for them. Another thing that I noticed with these judgments, because again, chapter 21 opens the door of our looking at the exact judgments that God gave. And the second one was controlling the human nature. If I had to group it or give it a label, I would call it controlling the human nature. And the reason I would call it that is because, again, it was a lot of them. It was a lot. It had to have been over 1 million, because again, 600,000 men walking, not counting children, not counting women, not counting the elderly. It had to be over 600,000 of them. And then you had the vast mixed company that was with them too. So with it being so many of them and with them traveling, conditions as they became worse or more challenging, for example, the running out of food, the running out of water, which was the first 2 complaints, where God miraculously showed up and showed out and prepared them, took care of them, provided for them. He's Jehovah Jireh. Another thing that they would have dealt with is just the tiredness and the exhaustion from their travels. I think about it like today, we get up and say we go on a trip, but we're driving. we're driving. And if you get restless, you know, when it comes to driving, or I don't know how else to describe it, but or like tired, just tired, like you ready to be there already, or you need to stop. In that tiredness, it can cause a person to be harsh, a little rash in their speech or in how they're dealing with one another. So this is what I wrote in my notes. I said, next, being tired because there was a journey that they were on to the promised land of milk and honey, which they didn't know what that would look like because they never experienced it. So they get away from their enemies, talking about the Egyptians. They no longer had to fear them because they saw all of them, you know, washed up dead on the seashore. Because God drowned the Egyptians in the Red Sea. So they're now brought to this territory called Elim, and it's an oasis. You have your palm trees, you have your water, like it's really a nice area. But that's not the area that they were going to stay at. That was not the end all of the areas. They have not yet arrived. They have not yet arrived. They still had another piece of the journey to go. And in that other piece of the journey, they now have to cross this wilderness of called sin, the wilderness of sin. And there's a lot of things happening and not happening in this wilderness. Happening is that it's dry, that it's barren. That is happening. You know, no doubt the heat, you know, no trees or anything. What was not happening in that wilderness is they were not getting to their destination quick enough. You know, if I had to put it some type of way, I know that God was providing for them. I know that He was providing for them, but as we see, they still made complaints, which you'll see in Exodus chapter 16. By that chapter, by the time you get to chapter 16 of Exodus, 31 days would have passed since they left Egypt. 31 days. We're talking about a whole month. And in that month, they like, oh, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Are we there yet? Are we there? So by the time you get to chapter 19, verse 10, they had made it through the wilderness experience. They're now at Mount Sinai, where they're being organized for travel. Why travel? Because from there at Mount Sinai, that's where they get their instructions before they get ready to go up and go into the promised land. So they're organized and structured for travel. On Sivan the 4th, Sivan would have now been the very next month. On Sivan the 4th, which was day 48, they were told to consecrate themselves. Now that's when this became real for me. This that I'm doing, which is counting the Omer, it became very real for me because I don't think I equated it with the journey that the Israelites was on coming from Egypt going to Mount Sinai. Like I don't know how I missed that. But on this day 48, this 48th day, which is Sivan the 4th, they were told to consecrate themselves. They were told to, basically what that means is from this mixed company that came out with them, they had to separate themselves from that mixed company. They needed to wash their garments and get ready for the third day. Now, the third day, during that time, for everything that was going on in that time, that third day is what we today call Pentecost. It falls on Sivan the 6th. Sivan, S-I-V-A-N, Sivan the 6th, every year. Sivan the 6th would have been day 50. So, this 49-day count of the Omer that we're doing, it represents the 49 days of the journey of Israel coming out of Egypt. And I'm like, oh, that's good. Like, okay. And so they were coming out of Egypt. And it was from that point to their arrival at Mount Sinai where they were to receive the commandments from God. The 49-day count, though, let me explain to you what it does. It helps us to examine ourselves, to govern ourselves as we journey through this symbolic wilderness that we're going. This that we're living in is a symbolic wilderness, and we're in it as we wait for God to step in and cleanse this world of all the evil, as He promised in Psalm chapter 37. I want to encourage you to go check out Psalm chapter 37 in its entirety. Now, week 1 of the counting of the Omer is 7 days long, and the entire 7 days has to deal with loving kindness. It's the Chesed, the loving kindness. We are currently in day 11. So day 8, 9, 10, 11. We're 4 days into the second week, which is called Gavura, which is discipline. That part. I'm not wanting to say that part. Oh, because this has been quite a week. So far this week, we have covered loving kindness and discipline. Discipline and discipline. Harmony. Which one are we on now? Harmony and discipline. And today is endurance and discipline. So I'm just saying, we just need to hang in there. Like, that's what that was for me yesterday. It's like, I'm just about to breathe, because the whole day was crazy. Amazing yet crazy. So we need to hang in there. We got 38 more days to go before we get to day 50, which is Pentecost. So anyway, God is talking to the Israelites, and He is addressing them about violence. That's the very first thing. And He lets them know at the start what the behaviors are that will bring upon them the death penalty. Number 1, if they premeditate to kill somebody. Number 2, if they strike or curse their father or mother. Number 1, to strike them, you're hitting them with your hand. To curse them, you're doing that with your mouth. But either one, if you curse your father or your mother, or if you strike your father or your mother, you are going to be put to death. The judgment of God for that is the death penalty. And it only makes sense because as a child, I'm here because of my mother and my father. So if I was to curse my mother or my father, I would be putting a curse on myself, because I came through that womb. I came from that seed. Anywho, the other one was if you kidnap someone, whether you sell them or not, whether you sell them like into the black market, because that's what they're doing, or not, if that kidnapped person is still found with you, you are going to be put to death. That part. So premeditation, that's a heart condition. And listen, one thing I know and have come to find is that God is not playing with us, and we are His garden, and so He is not playing when it comes to the weeds of wickedness. Just like you pull the weeds out the garden, God is snatching them out. Number 2, to come against one's parents. Again, you're coming against yourself, because you wouldn't be in the world if it was not for your two parents coming together. And to kidnap somebody as a slave, first of all, they should already know what it feels like to be a slave. So because of having experienced being a slave, they should not want that upon anybody else. Oh, and let me not forget this. Number 4, to seriously injure somebody, such as an unborn child, would bring the judgment of eye for eye, tooth for tooth upon the person. Yeah. So the next thing that you see, again, the first thing is how they treated one another, especially if they ended up with servants. If somebody sold themselves to them to be a servant, and how that person had to work the 6 years, and then on the 7th year they was go free, right? So it's our interaction with one another. The second thing, though, was violence. Like, he nipped that right in the bud as far as violence. And he let them know the behaviors that would get them killed. The third thing, now this was that was unexpected too. The third thing had to do with the animals. It was animal control laws. And it mentioned not sheep and goats, but it mentioned oxes and donkeys, or bulls and donkeys. Now, those are the beasts of burden, as we see that the Israelites did not just have sheep and goat. They also had these other animals that helped them with farming or carrying, these beasts of burden. And so that made me look up the temperament of the various animals, starting with the sheep and the goats. And what I found out in reference to the temperament of the sheep and goats is that these sheep and these goats, they're pretty much, well, let me just do the sheep. The sheep are considered to be docile and timid. They pretty much stick together, whereas the goats, they're intelligent and they're curious and they're a little mischievous and they're independent. And so they like to wander off. Your goats do. So having looked at that and considered the sheep and the goats, I'm now looking at the fact that this verse specifically said ox and donkeys, but it really, really, really talks about the ox. And so I decided to look up the temperament of the ox, and what I found is that they are patient, they're hardworking, they're dependable, and they're generally easygoing. They can be stubborn and rigid, but generally they're easygoing. So what causes an ox to gore? Which was my next question and next thing I was looking at, because of the judgment that was against the ox that gored. What causes an ox to do that is they do it instinctively to protect the herd and their territory. So they may challenge humans in reference to superiority. That part. Number two, though, another thing that causes an ox to gore is when they reach sexual maturity. They do this, number one, is play, and number two, they do it to challenge another for dominance. But it's during a time of sexual maturity. The third cause that would cause an ox to gore is when they perceive a threat and fear, because they are highly reactive animals, and initially that gore could be a fight or flight response. But there's two other reasons that could be behind why an ox would gore. The fourth reason would be hormones. Now, we mentioned number one, them trying to be protective, instinctively protecting their herd, protecting their territory. Number two, we mentioned the sexual maturity. They've reached that maturity when it comes to sex. So, yeah, they do it as play, but they also do it to challenge one another. Number three, we talked about the perceptions of fear, and how it impacts these highly highly reactive animals. Just put it like that. So number four is hormones. During breeding season, when the testosterone levels in these animals heightens, it also increases the irritability and the aggressiveness. Kind of make me think of menopause and what happens during menopause to a lot of women. Anywho, hormones was one. The fifth one, though, this one here, the fifth one, it could be an underlying medical issue, like a neurological issue or infectious or physical pain. that will cause them to be erratic. So verse 28 of Exodus chapter 21, it talks to us specifically about this ox that unexpectedly killed another. Let's go read that real quick. Verse 28, it says, Exodus chapter 21 verse 28, it says, if an ox gores a man to death, or a woman to death, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be acquitted. That part, it said the flesh of the ox was not to be eaten. Let's finish looking at this verse. Verse 28. I'm going to read down to verse number 32 in reference to the oxes and their goring. It says, if an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. But the owner of the ox shall be acquitted, meaning they won't be held accountable. It says, but if the ox tended to thrust with his horn in times past, and it has not been kept confined so that it has killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. If there is imposed on him a sum of money, then he shall pay to redeem his life, whatever is imposed on him. It says, whether it has gored a son or gored a daughter, according to this judgment it shall be done to him. If the ox gores a male or female servant, he should give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So, I wanted to read that because there was something in verse 28 that was mentioned in reference to this ox who unexpectedly gored. Verse 28 says, if the ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox will be acquitted, or shall be acquitted. So there's a couple of things that was happening here. Number one, again, the ox killed unexpectedly, man or woman, unexpectedly. The flesh of this ox could not be eaten. They placed a value on the life of the person who was killed. And that was one of the reasons why the flesh of the ox could not be eaten after it was boiled. And also to protect people, because it could be that the animal was diseased. So to prevent a person from catching this disease, prevent the disease from spreading. And remember, they did not have the skills that we have today. They did not have the knowledge, the mindset that we have today. So they would not have known if the animal was diseased or not. But if they followed God's judgments, they would have been protected, even without knowing that part. So verse 29 talks about the animal having done this before, where in verse 28 it would have been the first time the animal had never done this before, so the owner of the animal is not charged with this thing. But in verse 28, if the ox had done this before and the owner of the ox did not secure this ox, did not put it in a playpen, I'm calling it playpen, they didn't put it in a secure place where it could not harm anybody else, well, then that owner would be considered accountable. He would have had to pay a fine in order to redeem his life. Whatever that fine was, it didn't matter what was asked for, the owner would have had to pay for it. One thing I want to note again and make sure that I don't let this get away from me is that the men and the women are treated exactly the same. And the women considered, the women were not considered second-class citizens under God's law. That part. They were not considered second-class citizens. And we see that in the fact that these judgments that God gave included both the man and the woman. But as if that's it, because it's not. This rule also applied to the children. And you'll see that in verse 31. If the children were harmed in any way by this ox, then according to the judgment, it shall be done to him. So this is what it says. Whether it has gored a son or gored a daughter, according to this judgment, it shall be done to him. Meaning that if this was the first time that the animal did anything like that, he would be killed. This animal will be stoned to death. It will be killed. But the owner would not be held accountable because this was the first time. But if it had gave signs a while back that it was losing its mind basically, and the owner did not move to secure it, and these children would have been harmed, then the owner would have been blood guilty as well as the animal. So the animal would have still been stoned to death, and you still could not eat the animal's flesh. But the Israelites that would have been involved in this, the Israelite who owned the animal but didn't put him up, he would have had to either pay a price, whatever that price was for the restitution, or he would have been killed. I came across this article. It's called medium.com. The website is, and on that website people write their articles, and you can read them, or however. If you're not on the website, it'll give you only so much. It won't let you read the entire article, and then you still have to buy an account if you wanted to read the entire article. Anywho, I came across this article called God Uses Ox Goring to Teach Us the Value of Everyday Life. I'm going to say that again. How God uses let's see. How God uses ox goring to teach the value of everyday life, even slaves. I wanted to make sure that I was reading this right. The author of the article is a guy named Cal Davidson, and he wrote this article on my birthday on February 23rd. And so one of the things he wrote, he shared that God was teaching, reteaching, or unteaching his people about slavery, that God cares for them and that their lives matter. That part, their lives matter. And it was necessary for the Israel to have this teaching, this training, this understanding, because again, they had just came out of living the experience of slavery, where it was so drilled into them that a slave's life did not matter. So they needed to be taught the truth, which was that, catch this now, all lives matter. All lives matter. How about that? All lives matter is in the Bible. So this here, these animal control laws, it was deep. This part here, there's another part though. This part here, verse 33, it says, if a man opens a pit, or if a man digs a pit and falls into it and doesn't cover it, and an ox or donkey falls in, then the owner of the pit would then be held liable, and he would have to give the owner of the animal, he would have to pay money, like whatever was stipulated for that. He would have to pay money. And that stood out to me. I mentioned it earlier, but it stood out to me because of this book that I'm working on, that talks about the pit, actually, and falling into the pit. And it mentioned the consequence. In the book that I'm working on, it talks about the consequences of setting a trap to begin with. And we learned that, like, if you set a trap for somebody, you're going to fall into that trap yourself. Like, you're going to fall into that trap. So anyway, another thing I don't think I mentioned, the first, in regards to the animal control laws, the first 2 verses, I would say, dealt with, or the 3 verses, the first 3 verses dealt with an animal. No, not even the first 3, not the first 3, the first verse, verse 30. It dealt with an animal that had never had this issue before. Whereas verse 28 dealt with, I'm getting tired. Verse 28 dealt with an animal that had never gored anybody before that suddenly did that. Verse 29 and 30 dealt with the fact of an animal that has been known to do that. So we're looking at different consequences. Verse 28 through 30 deals with the issue of the person that was gored, that they lost their life, they died. Whereas verse 31 and 32 deals with the fact that the person, the child or the slave, did not lose their life. So God is really addressing different situations, different circumstances. Same animal, the same type of animal, ox, but different circumstances that may arise. And the fact that he even made mention that if a servant experienced being gored, but they survived it, the fact that there was a servant, that money would then go to the money stored up for the servant. So I thought that was interesting. We'll be looking at the judgments of God again as we look in Exodus chapter 26 this coming Saturday, which we're in Monday today. I had to keep telling myself this is Monday, but if I blink too long, I'm gonna open up and it's gonna be Friday. Anywho, we're gonna look at some more of the judgments that God gave to his people, and he's trying to show them that he cares. There was, I kind of skimmed through it, but if an unborn child, if somebody harmed an unborn child, whether it was by accident or not, they would experience, we call it tit for tat, but it's not tit for tat. They would have experienced whatever, they call it eye for eye. And that's where we get that tit for tat from. But they call it eye for eye. Whatever injury came upon this unborn child, the person that caused the injury would receive similar. That's deep. To see how much God cares, and to see how he's retraining them to let them know, this is what you experienced in Egypt, but these are my judgments, and this is how we're going to handle this. And yeah. Anywho, that is my Sabbath study review. I actually covered the entirety of it, all of the verses, but in breaking those verses down and reading a little at a time, and just really looking at this thing, like, I don't know how you cannot think that God loves you. And the crazy thing about it, I remember someone contacted me, this was like several years back, and they were trying to say, God promotes slavery, and yet here God was not talking to the slave. He was talking to the master, and he was letting the master know that this slave is important to me. This slave, the life of this slave matters. You know, that's huge. Anywho, I'm getting drained. You can probably see it in my eyes. I got to go back over this video for real, because some parts of it, I don't know what I said. I got to go back over this, and hopefully I won't have to like do any editing or take anything out. I'm about to do that now, and I'm about to go get me something to eat, because that's a part of why I'm feeling drained. I haven't ate it all day. All day. So yeah, we about to take care of that now. Y'all, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your support. I do. The comments when they're comments, I appreciate it. The thumbs up when they're thumbs up, I appreciate it. Just the fact that you're tuning in. I really, really hope that my studies are enhancing your own personal studies, that they're blessing you, and that you're getting something out of it, either what I got or more than what I got. Because one of the things I know is that we could look at a scripture, all of us can look at one verse and see something totally different in that verse, but what we see is what will apply to us, so or impact us in whatever way. So yeah, again, thank you for watching. Thank you so much for watching. You guys have a blessed rest of your day, okay? Bye for now.